Some of the best leadership lessons, they don't come from textbooks or a business school. They come from history. And today, we're going to dive into one of those. It's about a single public holiday in one country that teaches us something huge, something about how you build a future without just pretending a difficult past never happened. So, think about this for a second. How can a single date on the calendar hold two totally opposite truths? Like, for one group of people, it's a day of triumph, of victory. And for another group, that exact same day is a reminder of painful struggle. That's the core conflict we're digging into here. Well, for South Africa, December 16th was exactly that day. It was loaded with two completely conflicting histories. And what's so powerful is that the choice they made about this one date, man, it tells us so much about real leadership, about memory, and about how you actually move forward. Okay, so to really get why their choice was so brief, we've got to understand these two powerful, competing stories that are all wrapped up in this one day. All right, so on one hand, you've got the Day of the Vow. For a lot of Afrikaners, this was a huge deal, a day of pride, of faith, celebrating a really sacred victory. But then, for many Black South Africans, that very same day meant something totally different. It marked the start of the armed struggle against apartheid. It was a day of resistance, of resolve. So you see, two communities, one date, but the meanings couldn't be further apart. So the big question is, how did this happen? How did one day get so divided? Let's go back and trace the history, see where the paths split. This whole story plays out over more than 100 years. It all kicks off way back in 1838 with a battle. Then things take a really dramatic turn in 1961 when the armed resistance begins. And it all leads up to this incredibly powerful moment of redefinition in 1995. Let's zoom in on those two key moments. First, 1838. You have the Battle of Blood River, where Voortrekkers defeated Zulu forces. For a lot of Afrikaners, this wasn't just a military victory. They saw it as a sign from God, and it became known as the Day of the Vow. Fast forward to 1961. In what was a really deliberate and symbolic move, Umkhonto we Sizwe, that's the armed wing of the ANC, chose that exact same date to launch their campaign against the apartheid government. So all of this sets up a huge moment. When apartheid finally falls in 1994, the new government has this massive question on its hands. What do we do with a day that's so full of pain and division? Do we just get rid of it, try to erase it from the calendar? Or is there another way, a way to embrace it? And right here, this is where the real leadership lesson kicks in. I mean, the easy thing to do would have been to just scrap the holiday, right? Pretend it never happened. But they didn't do that. No, they made a much, much braver choice. They kept the date, but they decided to completely change what it stood for. They called it the Day of Reconciliation. And the way they defined reconciliation is so important. It wasn't about erasure. It wasn't about sweeping things under the rug. It was the total opposite. It was about acknowledgement. The whole point wasn't to forget, but to figure out how to remember together, even the parts that really, really hurt. And that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? You can't build real reconciliation on silence. It just doesn't work. It demands that you actually confront history, not just tell people to be quiet about their pain. It's a huge, challenging idea, for sure. Okay, so let's pull the big leadership lesson out of this, because this isn't just a history lesson about South Africa. It's about a skill that every single leader needs to have. And that is the ability to hold multiple, even conflicting truths in your hands at the very same time. And let's be clear, this is the really hard stuff. This is the messy work of leadership. First, you have to hold space for pain, even if you weren't the one who caused it. Second, you have to accept some responsibility for the world that pain created. And third, you have to make room for complexity. Because, let's face it, the simple, easy answer, it's almost never the full one. And this is so, so important. Leadership in these tough situations isn't about picking a side. It's not about saying, this story is right and that one is wrong. It's about creating a shared space, one that's big enough for multiple truths to exist at the same time, where one doesn't have to erase the other. Okay, I know this sounds like a big, abstract, national level thing, but trust me, this exact principle applies directly to our everyday lives, in our teams and our organizations. Let's bring it down to a work scenario you've probably seen before. All right, picture this. A company goes through a big restructuring. Now, from the leadership's point of view, the story is, hey, this was a strategic move, it was tough, but we had to do it to survive. It's logical, it's forward-thinking. But for the people who were laid off, Their story is totally different. It's a story of betrayal, of pain, of feeling like their loyalty meant nothing. And here's the crucial part. Both of those stories are true. They can both be 100% valid at the exact same time. So, how do you lead through that? Well, a weak leader tries to make their story the only story. They try to force it, and then they act all surprised when trust completely collapses. A better leader, though, they do the hard thing. They actually name the loss. They say, I know this hurts. Then they explain the why behind the decision, and they open the floor for questions. They manage to hold accountability for the pain in one hand and the need to move forward in the other. When you boil it all down, that's what this is about. Real leadership isn't about creating a neat and tidy narrative where everything makes perfect sense. It's about having the courage to tell the fuller story, the messier one, the one that's big enough to hold all the different truths. So, I want to leave you with this to think about. In your own organization, on your own team, what's a story that's only being told from one point of view right now? And what do you think would change? What could you unlock if you found the courage to make room for the other side of that story?